This next slide I'll just mention is going to be unique to this video, which is a medical advice disclaimer. So what we're going to be talking about this week is mental health and mental health challenges for program managers. And I want to be really, really clear up front that I am not a physician, not a counselor, or even a health professional. And the content that is provided here is for entertainment and informational purposes only. It is a very serious topic, and I don't want anything that is said here to be taken as medical diagnoses or medical direction in any way, shape, or form. Please always seek the advice of your physician or another qualified health provider with any questions that you might have. If you're experiencing mental health difficulties, please seek professional help as quickly as possible. Also, there are going to be some topics in here that might be stressful for folks, so please, your discretion is advised if you are concerned about talking or hearing about some of the mental health challenges that PMs face. But again, if you're in crisis, please seek immediate help and or call your emergency services. So that's the disclaimer. As I mentioned before, I'm not a physician, but you're going to hear me talk about some of the mental health challenges that we as PMs face because it's a huge part of this career. As much as we might not want it to be, it is. There is always some sort of challenge that happens as you move up in leadership, and a lot of them are very consistent across the board. And again, these challenges a lot of times are not, of course, limited to program managers, but you will feel a lot of these stresses as you move up the leadership chain. So I wanted to kind of talk about them, number one, to get them out in the open and allow us to have good conversations about it, to not be ashamed about these feelings or experiences, because virtually all leaders in one way, shape, or form have experienced some of these. So again, you're not alone, and that's why we want to kind of talk about it. So I'm going to go through about 8 or 9 of the main challenges that I've run into as a PM, and also stay to the end because we're going to talk about imposter syndrome, which is a really unique situation that occurs with leaders in certain situations. And I'll talk to you about that and ways that you can try to combat that, as well as some of these feelings as well. So many of us, if you're a PM now, you are very familiar with stress. It's just part of the job. We often, as managers, and certainly federal program managers, just have high levels of stress all the time because there are meeting deadlines or proposal deadlines or deliverable deadlines. There's budgets, there's conflict that occurs all the time. Particularly as you get larger in the programs, that conflict becomes, believe it or not, more apparent. I know there's this kind of dichotomy that you would think, oh, well, now, that I get to a higher and higher level with more and more people, I have fewer maybe direct reports, so I don't have to deal with it as much. That hasn't been the case as I've experienced it. As a program gets larger, there are more people involved and a greater opportunity to have something going sideways at any time. So again, there's always stress. There's always something that's going on. And for program managers, that stress usually doesn't end at 5 o'clock. So when we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that you can alleviate, this kind of chronic stress situation and try to break it up and at least give yourself a break, because as I mentioned, it starts when you wake up, and sometimes you can be woken up by issues related to program management, but it can also go into the evening, and chronic stress has a negative impact on so many areas of our lives, right? It can cause us to feel anxious. It can cause us to feel tired. Depression is an outcome of stress. You can also feel burnt out. So let's talk about that. So burnout is unique because I have been on the cusp of being burnt out before. And so I definitely want to talk about that, because I've actually known, many program managers that have burned out. It is absolutely a thing that you have to look out for, and there is no blame in burning out. There's a whole host of things that can cause you, to kind of burn out. With program management, there are long hours. There are usually high levels of responsibility. You have the stress of, feeling like, hey, I have to take care of my staff and my people. I got to make sure that I'm, leading appropriately and with integrity, and that, I worry about, the people that I work with, and I want to make sure that, they are feeling fulfilled and they're, doing okay. So that stress goes beyond yourself into, your entire staff. So it can feel daunting at times, but also, demanding workloads. So, which can cause kind of emotional and even physical exhaustion. So, and I still, to this day, I've not wrangled my calendar. And I know many of you have too. And I will talk about that a little bit when we talk about some suggestions to try to help you. But having a completely jammed calendar from start to finish in a day, number one, when you first open it and look at it, it could just be exhausting to think, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get a single break today. Also, there's going to be situations where you're double and triple booked. And again, a lot of that, I will say, is fixable. And some of that is due to, not being able to prioritize at a particular time. And also, you're just going to have to choose between them. So, that ongoing, stress can cause this kind of emotional and physical exhaustion, so that at the end of the day, you can be completely wiped out, even though you've almost been stuck in the chair. And as many of you know, this Zoom environment can be disastrous on your health. And I will say this, one thing that I tell my team, and I hope you do too, is that, we may have a couple of Zoom calls a week, but I do not want them showing up on camera every single time we have a communication. It's just simply not worth it to me to force them to be stuck to that chair all day, and, have to worry about that. Again, you've got to have some trust in your direct reports and believe that that's going to happen. Now, I will say this, you still have to show your face. As a PM, it's even more important a lot of times for you to be visible. But it's something to think about, because what's going to happen is if you are on camera all day and you're not moving from the chair, then you are going to be sore, tired, exhausted by the time 5 p.m., 6 p.m. rolls around, and you're going to, want to crash, which again, we'll talk about ways that you can try to combat this. But you don't want to crash. You need to get some exercise. You need to get moving. You need to, have something good to eat, something healthy. So with burnout, as I mentioned, a lot of us, as a program manager, when you're younger, you can start out and be, you're excited. This is a new exciting thing. You're looking for more responsibility, larger programs, because there's nothing more exciting than having a huge program and feeling like you have an opportunity to do some real good. One of the most wonderful feelings I've ever had is being able to lead a large program and having this idea that I could really help, one of our federal agencies to do better, to save money, to be more effective. And that's really exciting. And it's important to share that feeling with, your staff and anybody that works with you, because that excitement is contagious. But over time, what can happen is, and I'm still excited to this day, you can kind of see it, but there were times when, you kind of get that beaten down feeling where, things haven't been going so great. There can be any number of reasons why things are not going well. It could be, technical issues that you have to deal with, personnel issues that you have to deal with, contracts issues, finances, the whole gamut. And over time, if you're not careful, that can kind of grind you down. And so you lose that, kind of spark of excitement, and you get into this dread, right? And many of you have felt it. If you've ever had a Sunday night where you've had to open your calendar and you get that kind of feeling in the pit of your stomach, like, it's Monday tomorrow and we're back into it, then you're burning out. So you have to be aware of that. It's one of the most, it can be debilitating. It can feel like you are not going to be able to accomplish anything. You become cynical. You're tired all the time. You have no desire or motivation to do more and to learn and to continue to grow. It can be really, really hard to perform any basic functions if you're in that state. So it's really important that you keep an eye out for something like burnout. And if you start to feel like you're getting that kind of cynical dread, any of those feelings, you need to be cognizant of it and try to do some of the suggestions that we have. But first and foremost, always try to, seek somebody to talk to, and we'll go through some of those. Anxiety. So these may sound similar, but they're really not. They are definitely different feelings that we experience, and that's why I want to have them in here. So you have dread, right? Which is, oh gosh, we're getting back into a week, and all the stuff is going to come pouring back into this. But a lot of times, anxiety can almost freeze you, right? Which is, you have a fear of making the wrong decision, and so you're anxious inside because you may feel like, do I have enough information to make the right decision here? Do I have enough experience? And also things like, well, if we mess up or something happens on the contract, my job could go away. Then what do I do, to support my family? And this anxiety can spin out of control in a heartbeat. And for anybody that's watching that isn't a manager today, a lot of your leaders and managers are feeling this way. And it's important for us to all kind of remember that, is that, no matter where you are, a lot of times you can be, kind of hit by this fear of failure, or fear of making the wrong decision, or this huge uncertainty about the future of your career. And it can be really difficult to kind of push through that. So a lot of times in that situation, where I was saying before, with burnout, you kind of get exhausted. With anxiety, you get kind of a nervousness, a restlessness. And a lot of times, not only do you have difficulty performing your job, but you will also have things like sleep problems, right? And I'll talk in a minute about, your sleep is going to be so important for your health. If you have anxiety, right before you go to bed, your mind begins to spin. And that's when you get into this loop and this cycle that you're not able to get out of. So you end up, instead of going to bed at a normal hour, and by the way, that's what my ring is for. It reminds me when to go to bed. It tells me about how my sleep is. And there's a reason that I'm wearing that, because guess what? I had issues with sleep in the past. Now I'm doing okay. The reason is because I'm keeping an eye on it and tracking it, and I do that. Whatever mechanism you use to do that. There are tons of apps now for your phones that can do a lot of this for us. So I do recommend use technology to help you keep track of these kinds of things. The last one on this page is depression, and I'm not going to go into that too much because, again, like I said, I'm not a mental health professional, but you can certainly feel this sadness and hopelessness when you are a program manager. There are a whole host of ways that this can happen. It can happen when you are, fail to perform at a contract level, and you don't know what to do. You don't know how to fix it, or something that's kind of out of your control has spiraled into your program, and you just don't know. You've done everything you could correctly, and you've worked and worked and worked, and you've killed yourself to try to make sure that you were delivering the best possible program, and stuff just sometimes doesn't work out. In those situations, you can tilt into just hopelessness. Like, I have tried everything I can think of, and nothing is working. And then you get that feeling of like sadness, and you lose any kind of energy that you may have had. You're just exhausted all the time. And the one thing I'll say about depression is, and as I mentioned, these are experiences that I've had, virtually, all of them. And with something like depression, it can be really isolating. And I'll mention isolation here because I think for PMs, for people that are on the outside looking in, like for me, I'm an introvert. People cannot believe it when I say that I'm an introvert, but I have been, for many, many, many years, right? Basically my whole life. Although I do like to interact with people, if given the opportunity, right, I would be perfectly happy, sitting at home playing a video game or reading a book. So, in those situations, what's interesting is, even though I seem like I am outgoing and, really enjoy talking to people and am happy a lot of the time, right, that may not be the truth of what's going on inside. And so in those situations, a lot of times that can even be more isolating, where you feel like, I'm alone in the way I feel. I'm the only one that's having this situation. There must be something wrong. I'm not able to cope. I mean, for goodness sake, for those of us that have been managers for 10, 15 years, like, how can this still be happening? How can I still be feeling these kinds of things? I've been working at this job my entire life. And it can be terrifying to have those feelings hit you, kind of out of the blue. And it can also be really hard to get them under control. So again, with the isolation part is something that you just need to be aware of. It's really important, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, to connect with other PMs and to always remember that if you have a PM, let's say you're a PM today, and somebody reaches out to you to talk, that's another PM or is looking to become a PM, a lot of times we are all super busy and hyper busy. And because we are hyper busy, we don't want to put any more stress on another PM. So a lot of times we simply don't reach out. We also know that our managers are probably even more stressed than we are. So a lot of times we won't push up to have that conversation with our managers, right? And you're certainly, in a lot of situations, you need to project that you have control. You're good. I got it. I'm handling this. We are in good shape. We're moving forward. Everything's great, right? So I can't be perceived as falling apart in front of our staff, because again, if you've ever, seen a manager come apart, it's terrifying. And you may think, oh my gosh, who's guiding the ship? And this could be a disaster. So you have to convey, and I stress this to a lot of up and coming managers, is no matter what, you've got to convey that you've got it under control, regardless of how chaotic it might be. You have to at least express a sense of stability. And so again, in these kinds of situations, that, as a PM, you may be expressing the stability, but inside you're just wiped out. And that can be really, really hard, because again, you have to use all of this energy to express a state and a feeling that you don't have. So what I was mentioning earlier about, if you have a PM reach out to you, please, take an opportunity to talk with them. They may just be desperate. They may need your help, and they may need to just hear the voice of another, PM that is dealing with this kind of stuff. And there are not a lot of people that PMs can talk to that have experienced what you experience as a PM. So it's really important to have these connections. And, I mentioned LinkedIn. I think that's a good place to be, number one, just from a professional perspective, but you can also meet up with folks there. There's a lot of times in both your organizations at work and outside of work, you can get into professional groups and things like that, where you will meet and see other PMs and you can talk about these things. And I think that's incredibly helpful. So this is 4. We're going to go to, there's still another page of stuff that you may experience. But again, all of these things, you may have experienced them at some time in any part of your jobs. It just, can get magnified as you become a more and more senior PM. And we just need to be, aware that these things could happen and do what we can to, combat them. So, all right. So these 3 are kind of unique, and I'll get to the last one. I'm really excited to talk about imposter syndrome, because that's a unique one. And that's one that's a lot of times pretty unique to senior leaders. So we'll go through that. Work-life balance is kind of a culmination of a lot of these, pieces put together, right? Where, you want to make sure that you get time for yourself, right? Time for your family. And that's going to be hypercritical, because so many of us, you are going to get completely wiped out by work. I guarantee if you asked most PMs that are out there today, they are not working 40 hours a week, right? They are generally working more. And sometimes it can get overwhelming how many hours you will work in the process of doing your job, especially when there's things that are happening, like you're in a proposal, or you're dealing with a huge rollout, or some sort of technology change that's going on your contract. Any of those things can cause those hours and that work-life balance to get even more out of whack. And it's really going to be important for you to deal with your demanding schedule by at least giving you and your family some time. And, my recommendation is, in the chaos of the calendars that we have, you might just need to block that time. And I have to say this, it is fair and reasonable for you as a human being to have that time. You do not need to be working 24 hours a day. No matter how good we might, feel like our ability to work is, right? You are going to hit a wall at some point, and your productivity is just going to drop. They've got, paper after paper, scientific paper about that situation where after a period of time, you just get, you're in a downward spiral. Your productivity is falling, and you're trying to push through it. Again, it's better to have some downtime. And also, I'll say this, for me, it's helpful to get away from it for a minute. So even if you're in the midst of stuff and you can't drop it, try to walk away and just, take a lap around the house, or, walk down the driveway and take a little, walk up and down the street, or just something to get away from it for a few seconds so that, when you get back, you can kind of look at it in a fresh perspective. But the levels of responsibility and the super demanding schedules can very easily break your work-life balance. So you are going to have to focus on that, not only for your benefit, but your family's benefit. You don't want to look back after a career of 20 years and say, I wish I had spent more time with my children, and I wish I'd spent more time with my spouse, and, those kinds of things. You don't want that stuff to come up when, it's too late. So, and now I think more than ever, there's a much greater, many more eyes are looking at how many hours people are working. And we need, it needs to be talked about, because again, as program managers, you're not forced to work 50 hours a week, but you will do it because that's what you need to do. You just have to get the work done. It has to be done. So, in those situations, you're going to do it. And a lot of times you're going to do it in lieu of having, your team do it. Again, a lot of times program managers will feel this need to be the hardest worker on the team, because we want to inspire and show folks, hey, this is how you can do it. We can, you can keep going. You can do great work. It's going to be fine. And a lot of times that's just wiping out our work-life balance. We just have none, right? So you end up, getting done at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. You have, you're running to eat dinner, and you're literally either collapsing, or you're going to try to put, get a few minutes of exercise in, and then you're going to bed, and it all starts over again. And that's just, again, that can be a disaster for you long term. It to me, what it used to do was that causes burnout, number one, but also it reduces your creativity and your excitement for your job, because we're just constantly in it. It doesn't even give your mind a chance to refresh. So try to do that. Try to get away and keep, one of the things, don't feel guilty. It is the first thing you're going to do as a program manager, and even, any part of your management journey, you're going to feel guilty. Like you feel like, I can't take time for myself because my team is working, right? And this is a huge example. I had folks that worked on the East Coast and West Coast. I still do. In that situation, you can literally get calls, at the crack of dawn on the East Coast, starting at 6 a.m., because that's when the call center opens, all the way to 9 or midnight on the West Coast, right? Because you've got time zones in between. And there are even global contracts that you have to deal with time zones. You will never have enough time to meet with everybody that wants to meet with you. And I can tell you that right now. And so you are going to need to cut that off at some point, and be okay with it. Don't feel guilty. Especially if you know that you are working with integrity and you're doing everything you can to get the job done. It's not fair for you to feel guilty for taking, a couple of hours with your family at night to have dinner, or spend time with your children or spouse or friends or family. It's perfectly reasonable to do that. So again, work-life balance is a huge deal. It always has been, because for me, because I try to make sure that my team is aware of that too, right? And that's something you're going to need to do also, is you have to create a culture of this idea that family comes first, right? So that's really hard. And, I even cringe, thinking, is somebody going to hear me say that and judge me, that I'm not a good program manager if I say family is first? But if something happens to your spouse, there is no way you're going to be focused on the job, and you shouldn't be. I'm sorry. This is a hot take, But you know what I mean? And you need to have and convey that to your team as well, because you need them to be able to be focused when they're working, but also to make sure that, you know, they're not leaving their family behind. That, you know, there are so many events that happen in people's lives that we need to, as leaders and managers, be cognizant of and be okay with your team taking time. You just have to do that, and you have to do it for yourself. Because again, like I said, this balance and this ability to lead does not require you to be available 24/7. And your family, I've always said, family comes first. And that family, you know, it's so funny. People always give me a hard time. That family can include pets. You know, I'm sorry. You know, I'm just going to say it. Another hot take. I'm full of them tonight, you know, because people, you know, trust me when I say, I certainly understand when you have a pet that you love, you know, just like a family member. So, you know, it's okay if something happens to them to go take care of them, you know, and to do that. It's just okay. So don't feel guilty. Go do it, you know, and deal with it with no guilt. Okay. You're going to feel it. You're going to feel it creeping in, but you got to shut it down because it's just not fair. You know, that's perfectly reasonable for you to take care of your family. Okay. So leadership challenges. This is more amorphous because, you know, the bottom line is that managing other people, if I had to say what the hardest thing was in my career, it's working with people. If I had to say what the best part of my career was, it's working with people, right? I mean, you can be utterly inspired and in awe of the ability for a team to come together and deliver an incredible product, incredible solution, save the day. There's nothing more exciting than seeing a team work together and people work together and come together for, you know, a positive outcome. It's incredible. But at the same time, you know, as I mentioned before, you have more and more people as you move up the stack in the program management space, and those team dynamics become really challenging, right? You can run into, instead of having, you know, a one-to-one relationship where if you're in a small contract, you may have 4 or 5 direct reports, and that's the contract. In that situation, there's a team dynamic between you and the person and those people between each other, right? But there's 5 of them, 1 of you, 6 people. Those are the relationships that, you know, are involved in the team dynamics. Move that to 300, 500, 700 people, right? That number goes off the scale. And the problem is that you will find that regardless of how much you want to encourage and support every single person, there are going to be situations in which team dynamics are not in tune or in sync, and, you know, supporting a particular project or something like that may benefit one person and it may frustrate another. And that's not what you want, but no matter what, you've got to be able to pick and you have to make a decision. And that, to me, honestly, so I'll take a sidebar here. A lot of people talk about leaders that are confident. That's a, you know, a great trait of a leader, you know, confidence, you know, emotional intelligence. They're able to control their emotions, and things like that. But, you know, one of the pieces that I have always had a challenge with is empathy. So, you know, on the scale of you know, not caring at all to very empathetic, I have always been on the side of empathetic. And I think for folks that are like that, these leadership challenges are an even bigger problem. So, because when you've got an empathetic, you know, side to you, you don't want people hurting. You don't want people frustrated. You want everybody to be happy. And so in what you're going to find as you get more and more up in the larger programs is you're going to be in a state of constant, you know, you're just going to have to make it work. You're constantly, you know, giving and taking. You're constantly dealing with a situation where it's not perfect, right? You'd like it to be perfect. You'd like everybody to be happy, but you are constantly going to be in a state of, you know, balancing positives and negatives. You're never going to have the ideal state. And that's something that's really hard. No matter how hard you work, it just happens. There are so many relationships in that dynamic setup that there's going to be somebody that's upset. And when they say you can't make everybody happy, that goes up exponentially the more people you're trying to make happy, right? It's just you and you know, your friend. You know, I just need one person to be happy. and myself. And we're cool, no problem. When you have 700, that is an enormous amount of emotions and charged environments and everything and all these relationships that are happening. And all of that, lends itself to these struggles, these challenges, especially for folks that are more empathetic, because you are, it's always in a state of not quite exactly where you want it. And you're going to have to be okay with that. And it's one of the hardest things that I deal with on a regular basis is that situation where, I'm always, making some sort of compromise. And that's, that's the big word, is you're always compromising. You're always you're going to be stuck, with some, part of the solution that isn't really what you wanted. And that is it can be a pain, it can stick with you, but you're going to have to deal with it. So, just be aware of those things up front. So team dynamics and relationships. And by the way, if you're empathetic, there's nothing wrong with that. And also, I will say too, I mean, I've told you two pretty personal things about myself today, which is, one is I tend to be an introvert, which is, a lot of people say, are you crazy? That's not how you portray yourself. And I say, I'm not trying to portray myself that way. It's just how I feel. And so if you're an introvert, you can lead. You can lead. It's not a problem. Same thing with extroverts. You can lead too. It's just going to be a slightly different set of excuse me, a set of capabilities that are a little bit different. And leaders can have strengths and weaknesses across the board in different levels. Like I said, if you are confident and you're excitable and you can get people passionate about a project, that's fantastic. If you are more structured and organized, and what you do really well is process management, that can actually lead to great success on projects. So again, keep that in mind. The leadership challenges that we're talking about in team dynamics also are related to your dynamics, how you are, and how you approach the situation. So the next part of the leadership dynamic is, I apologize for leaning forward and getting comfortable. My wife watched one of my last streams and said that was disconcerting when I would lean towards the camera. So I apologize for that. Okay. She is my best and most wonderful critic. She's not. She supports me completely, and I really appreciate that. Anyway, I had to share that. I thought that was hilarious. Okay, so the second piece of this leadership challenges would be related to motivating employees. Like you heard me say before, you have to at least come at the situation when you're interfacing with staff where you've got it together. Okay. That's where I think people that get overly emotional and start yelling and screaming, no matter what the situation is, that is not the best response. Number one, people deserve respect regardless of what's going on, especially at work, but there is a better way to deal with that. And so again, if you're in that situation, you need to at least think about, I want to be in control and convey stability, right? I want folks to know that regardless of what gets thrown at us, we're going to be okay. Because again, in my, 20 plus years of doing this, there has not been a situation that has just catastrophically blown everything apart. I've certainly felt that way, right? I've had plenty of experiences that I thought everything is going off the rails and we are doomed, right? We had this running joke that, I think there was a Dilbert cartoon that said, we tried this 6 years ago, it didn't. We tried it 10 years ago. At this point, we're either going to be dead or in jail after this situation, right? And I say that just as a joke, but literally, for the most part, anything that hits you is going to be something that you can manage and deal with. Now, again, there are pieces that are going to be beyond that, which are things like you have to operate with integrity. So you can't get into a situation where there are legal bounds that you've broken. So, those things will destroy a contract in a heartbeat. And not only can they destroy a contract, they can destroy a company. So again, I'm joking around in a lot of these things, but you want that stability and that face of confidence and calmness. But it also has to be backed up with integrity, so that that you've done everything you can to make sure this is going the way it needs to go. your customer knows that your number one focus is delivering them the best possible solution and product and capability that you can. So they know that. And that's part of this operating with integrity and building these relationships over time. So again, when you come at employees, come at them stable and calm, as much as possible. Now, and again, when it comes to motivating, this is, again, we've seen videos about this all over the place. I'm sure you've read books. There are the 5 love languages. There is just a million different ways to look at what motivates a person. And I was wildly interested in this when I started my career, because you feel like there's got to be a key that I can unlock for each individual, so this person, really cares about money, and this person really cares about, status, and this person really cares about flexibility, whatever. It's Maslow's hierarchy all over again. But then you really begin to realize that motivating a person is not a lock and key situation. It just isn't. And it can also be really frustrating for you to try to, figure out what that combination is to motivate this person. Because there are going to be some folks that you are simply not going to be able to motivate. And that was a realization that took, years for me to get to, was that as excited and passionate as you are, there are folks that are going to come into your organization that are not motivatable. They're not trainable. They are not going to change. And that has to be okay. But also, you've got to identify whether that mindset will fit within your organization, because that can also be a mess if you have somebody that's, demotivated or even destructive in an organization. You've heard the term kind of cancerous. It can grow and cause a whole bunch of problems. So you do have to be very cognizant of that situation and aware. But to motivate people, like you heard me mention before, I kind of jokingly said Maslow's hierarchy. But a lot of people do have some motivational pieces, and it is important to understand what some of those levers are, so that when you have discussions, open, honest discussions with employees, that you understand and try to understand from them what is the most important thing about, where you want to be in your career and what you want to do, and that can help you understand, this person's really into learning and they like to explore new things. So give them as much training as they could possibly want. If the company only gives them $3,000, figure out a way to double that, triple it. I don't care, because this person is hungry and they want knowledge, and they're going to, if you show them that you support that, they're more likely to stay. Now, will you get folks that go through this stuff, get all the certifications, and immediately walk out the door? Yes. And those are the ones that hurt. But that's just the reality of being a program manager. And so you are going to deal with the challenges of motivating people, and like I said, and you heard me before, that can be exhausting, because it is constantly you putting out energy a lot of times. And so it is really important, and I'll mention this on the next screen, that you have people in your team that are close to you, that are giving energy back to you, right? That are supportive and capable, because there is not an unlimited font of energy inside you. There is a limit. And if you are constantly pouring into other people, that energy is going to go away and you are going to get into burnout. It's exactly, what we were talking about before. And a lot of times, and I'll say this too, because you may have experienced this, when you fully burn out, it can be almost impossible to recover, from that burnout with that customer. Like it can just be like, I've got to get out of here. And you've got to move on and you got to do something else. So it's really important to know when your energy levels are dropping and what's causing that, and surrounding yourself with, people that will support you and also provide you motivation. I get very motivated when I'm having a conversation with, employees that are excited and they've got new ideas and they're thinking outside the box and they're being creative and they're trying to solve problems. That is something that I get motivated by, and I feel that kind of excitement, and so when you walk away from that kind of interaction, you feel energized, right? So as a PM, one of the things you have to look at is every interaction is going to go one of two ways. It could go three. It could be completely neutral and there's nothing that happens. It's either going to take energy from you where you're going to be either having to deal with a situation that's not great, and maybe you have to be doing some sort of kind of discipline. That is really, it tends to take a lot of energy out of you, especially if you're empathetic to the employee, but sometimes you just have to do it. Versus situations in which you walk away from it, kind of motivated. You walk away from it excited, empowered, you feel really good. If those two don't coincide, I mean, a lot of program managers will say, hey, look, I'm constantly on this side, the side of where you're burning energy and you're sending, pushing it into people all the time and expending it, and you're never getting your tanks refilled. In that situation, that is an absolute, perfect example of what, will cause burnout. So just be careful. Again, motivating people that could be an entire discussion and talk. There are books on it. There are courses on it. There's entire, careers based on motivation. So it's tough. So don't feel bad if you're starting out and you're having difficulties figuring out how to motivate people. It's one of the toughest things in the world. So be okay with that and be okay with learning. The other thing that I'll mention is conflict. I tend to be very conflict averse. Another tidbit about me, I don't like confrontation. I can do it, it's part of the deal. Once you get to this point, you have to be able to confront and address the situations. That's okay. I do it. I don't like it, but I'll do it if we need to. And you've got to be that way too. When you reach a point where conflict is inevitable and that's the only way that you are going to resolve the situation, be okay going in and doing it. You have to be confident in that, and you have to be okay with that. You are the one making the decision, and you need to be able to make it with confidence and quickly. Okay, so anyway, that whole piece about conflict is something that a lot of us require training on. And again, if you have conflict, you have to do it with respect, right? You have to still deal with the fact that this is another human being. So there will be conflict. There will be things that upset the situation. There will be people that will lie to you. There will be, information that is kept from you, a whole host of different interactions that can result in conflict. So, from the start of your career, try to learn about conflict resolution. Almost every leadership, training session will have something about, conflict resolution, because it's hard to do. So, okay, so we talked about a lot of the, basics, right? We've all experienced a lot of those pieces that program managers have to deal with. But the last one that I want to spend just a few minutes on, and then we'll go into some ideas for how you can improve these situations, is imposter syndrome. So I prefaced my talk tonight with a post to LinkedIn where I said, have you ever felt like you don't deserve your job? It's a weird question, right? That doesn't seem like something that would happen, especially for somebody that's, been a leader for a long period of time or has worked really hard to get into a leadership position. But it is something that happens to a lot of us, and it's happened to me, where, what imposter syndrome is this fear of being found out. Like somehow I'm gaming the system and somebody's going to realize that I am not qualified to do this and I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm a fraud. I'm not trained enough for this. I can't do this, even though there is significant evidence and experience to the contrary, right? You have worked, for years to become an expert in the area that you are managing. You have the credentials, you've done the work, but you can still have this feeling that I'm not good enough. I don't deserve this. What am I doing? And that fear it can really mess you up. Like what it can do a lot of times is really impact your confidence, and it can impact your performance because you're less likely to do things like cool, exciting risks. Like you're less likely to, try new things. Because if I screw this up, then everybody's going to realize that I really don't know what I'm doing, and that kind of stuff. And that by definition is going to reduce your ability to innovate, reduce your ability to kind of move on your feet, and quickly make, decisions to do new things and exciting things and take risks. Risk isn't always bad, right? We've been trained that way. There is risk, that you can balance and you can work with. So in that situation, when you have this imposter syndrome, you are way, way more risk averse than you would be in a normal situation. You're just not going to step out at all. We're going to keep things in line and we're just going to glide along. And what that ends up doing for a lot of us is the performance on contract, can just stabilize. You're delivering. That's fine. Everything's going okay. All your SLAs are being met. Your deliverables are on time, but you're not exceeding the customer's expectations. You're not trying to figure out ways to save them money by, using emerging technologies or trying some new innovative technique or technology to improve and speed up processes and things like that. It's just none of that's happening. So in a lot of these situations, it's important for us as leaders to take a look at those feelings. And one of the best things to do in a situation is to evaluate whether or not it's really valid. You, a lot of times, are your worst critic, right? Because for a lot of leaders, you're setting a bar. You're setting a okay, sorry about that. Make sure that we're back. It looks like we lost the connection for a minute. Let me make sure we're back on stream, and then I'll continue. I've only got about 10 minutes more, so I want to finish out. Okay, I think we're good. Sorry about that. We lost connection for a minute. Okay, as I was saying before, you are, in a lot of cases, your worst critic. Right? You are the one that has this insanely high bar that you need to exceed. And in all those situations, that bar can make you feel like you're never going to reach it. Like, okay, I got the $3 million contract with 20 people. Okay. So now I want the $10 million contract, with 50 people, or whatever the numbers are. Right. Or I want the $300 million contract with 250 people, or I want the $1 billion contract. It never stops. There's not a ceiling here. You can always continue to go up the stack, and even there, you can take a left turn and you can go towards account management and vice presidencies and those kinds of things. So there was always another step, and you want to get a gauge in your mind about where do you want to target, where do you want to be. And again, keep it rational and keep evaluating. Am I doing things that are helping me to get to that position that I want to be in? And if you are, then you're not an imposter, right? Because the fact of the matter is that there are fewer leaders than workers for a reason, right? It's the leaders want to be leaders. They believe in the ability to lead, and they want to support people and do great things. That's a lot of times these are things that motivate a leader. And so in those situations, it's very easy for us to overestimate, the things that we have to do. So you got to be really careful about that, because you can very quickly doubt your abilities, and that can be a huge problem, and doubt your accomplishments. Like, you can have a list of things that you've done in the past, great contracts you run, all kinds of accolades, all this other stuff, and yet you still can wake up in the morning and be like, I'm terrified that today something is going to happen that is going to blow the doors open, and everybody is going to, suddenly think much, much worse of me, And I'll say this, personal experience. One of the most difficult things I've ever experienced is losing a contract. This is something no PM wants to talk about. I'll just be honest, right? Losing a contract, and we all know this, is the PM's worst nightmare, because you take all of that completely on yourself. There's no way around it. It's just the reality of how, running a contract works. Because, did you do something wrong with the relationship with your customer? Did you do something wrong in delivering and executing the program? And in certain situations, you can have all of those boxes checked and you can still not win. a recompete, and it is devastating, right? Some of the lowest points that I've ever had in my career is following a loss, but you can bounce back from that. It took me a long time to get over, those feelings, and you have to work through it. And I hope you don't ever have to deal with it, honestly, because it really starts to get you to question, your capabilities. You feel miserable about, letting down your people. And that's the worst of it, is that you feel like you've let down your people. You feel like you've let down your management, your company, somehow let your customer down. And you're constantly looking for what caused this situation. That will blow imposter syndrome out of the, it'll blow it up. That's a perfect example of where you start to question everything that you do. And so you've got to, in those situations, get back into, another position quickly, find another, you can continue to do PM work, and you should, if that's what you want to do, because you are trained to do those things, right? You can always look back and know that you have this feeling that, the PM is ultimately responsible for that contract. It's just how everybody feels, right? Without speaking it out loud, so you have this pressure on you that I've got to make this thing succeed. And if I don't, like I said earlier, you've let everybody down. The whole thing is just a mess. It's a disaster, including yourself. You've let yourself down. And in those situations, you've got to be able to realize that even through that loss, you have learned something. You have tried to, review it and figure out where things may have gone wrong, or even if you've learned about yourself, how you react to these things, that's a benefit. It's something that you've gained that is going to help you in the future. So in that situation, again, losses are the hardest things. And I will probably dedicate an entire, kind of episode to talking about how to come out of that, because it can be really hard. But with imposter syndrome, it's one of those weird challenges that many of us, will run into. And it's somewhat unique to leadership, right? Because you by default have to be in kind of a leadership role to feel like you're not deserving of that role. So it's kind of unique, and it can really impact your ability, to get as far as you would as a leader. It can impact your ability to reach your potential. So again, interesting stuff to keep an eye on. It's one of the weirdest sensations, but I bet many of us have had this feeling, and it's perfectly normal and completely okay. So, yeah. So with that in mind, we'll go to, for the last couple minutes, I just want to give some ideas and thoughts around things that I've tried to do to help address some of these, in my situation. So, before we do, I just want to mention, so let me say this. How many managers, deal with mental health challenges? Tons and tons and tons and tons. It is extremely common. So, and I will say this, seeking support is a sign of strength. Seek the support. It's okay. It shows that you are able to be objective and look at yourself and realize, hey, I need to talk to somebody. There's nothing wrong with that. That's important for you to be able to do that. You're not alone. You're not weird. You're not weak. You're not unqualified, right? All of us have had situations like this that we've had to deal with. Regardless of how good you feel like you might be at leading or how much your contract, there are always going to be situations that can tip the scales, and you can experience one of these situations. So be okay with that. Be on the lookout. So what I said before, and it's saying on number 3 here is it's necessary to consider it closely. Consider this, that you will probably deal with something like this, and be okay with it, number 1, and then have a plan. Think about how can I work with this, and who can I talk to, and what can I do to address it, and evaluate it on a regular basis. Because we can talk ourselves into believing something that isn't true either. You've got to be able to objectively evaluate yourself on a continuous basis. All right. So as I mentioned in the disclaimer, when it comes to mental health, it is always the right thing to do to speak with a professional. So again, that's okay. Please do it. Please consult, a professional. I think, all of us, for leaders, it should almost be required that we have, we talk to a counselor, we talk to folks actually wish that was part of our training, is that we were able to kind of, engage with someone that has dealt with, leaders that have gone through this before. It would be so helpful. So anyway, please, if you need help, always be okay with getting it. All right. So slide for tonight is, how can we combat these things? Okay, and a lot of these I've gone through, so we're just going to do a quick wrap up. And again, you know yourself, and your family and friends and loved ones know you well. I don't know you. I know me, right? And so these are things that I did. They may work for you. They might not. But it's got to be okay for you to do different things, and even potentially, maybe some of these won't work for you. Anyway, first and foremost, always seek support. You can always benefit from talking to a trusted friend, a family member, even a trusted staff member. You have to be more careful with that. I will say that. So it generally has to be somebody that you trust. Again, that's when you just got to be careful with. It has to be somebody you trust immensely, because you generally don't want to have these discussions with people that report in your chain. So I just would tend to not use that connection point to talk to. I would generally recommend, talking to a professional or family or friend, or even, like I said, other PMs and things like that to have those discussions. They'll have similar experience, and they can provide you with some great suggestions. I've had some of the best suggestions in my life from experienced managers that I've had time to, sit and talk to. Also, like I mentioned, if you have a mentor, or if you can be a mentor, please do that, and help, up and coming leaders, because this is the same stuff that we would want, right? As we were coming up, we needed someone that we could talk to and throw ideas at, and they've been through this before and they can kind of help us. So yeah, always seek support. Prioritize taking care of yourself. Again, as you heard me mention before, the work-life balance, the amount of stress that managers deal with is immense. And if you don't take that into account and you don't focus on taking care of yourself, you are always going to take the hit. You're always going to be, compromising your time, compromising your health. You're going to always be doing that unless you take control of that and make sure that you focus on it. So again, you heard me mention before, trying to do exercise. I can't stress it enough. It's very easy for us to sit for hours and hours and hours staring at a camera or working at a desk, and it'll kill you. Just get out of the desk, walk around, do something to break up the monotony, and also get some exercise. It's super important. Hobbies are great. It's funny when you hear like, oh, this manager plays the saxophone. I'm like, what? And I think to myself, that's awesome. They have a hobby. This one tinkers with cars, or this one, loves to, work in the garden and, likes to grow stuff. These are all great things that can help you break from this cycle of I'm constantly at work. So again, do that, and you'll see mindfulness in here all over the place. And there's plenty of meditations and plenty of videos that you can look at on that. So I won't go into that, but it's super important. You need to take time to kind of, relax and get your mind clear, because it's constantly running. That's just the nature of the beast when you're a manager. Manage your workload. So one of the biggest challenges that I had, as you heard me mention before, was this insane calendar. So you have got to be able to delegate and get it under control, because otherwise, number one, you're not going to grow a pipeline of managers that can help push that entire project forward. It's always going to be you trying to pull on people to get work from them. You don't want that. You want to train them and allow them to help push with you, and hopefully exceed you. That's one of the things that a lot of times you want as a manager is, yeah, blow right by me. I will support that. But it's going to be really important to be able to delegate a lot of those responsibilities. I had a discussion, and a good friend mentioned this comment to me. He said, it's really not fair for you to not express what issues you may have with a worker's output. And I thought, why? And it's like, it's not fair to them because you're not conveying what you need. You're not helping them to deliver what it is that you want. You're actually being, disingenuous to your staff. So it was a brilliant thought, around this idea of not only, should you not feel bad about explaining that you need to take on this role, and this is what I need from you. It's actually disingenuous for you to not do that because you could be halting their career, their growth. I think it's a really brilliant way to look at it. So again, be able to delegate, manage your workload, take breaks, like I said before. Set boundaries, it shouldn't be that anyone on your program can call you any time of the day and night. It can't be that way. You've got to be able to put your phone down, and yeah, I get that there's emergencies, and you may, like I do, I will put it in my signature that if it's an emergency, call and or text. And if I get a call, I may check it, but I'm not going to stop what I'm doing with my family to go and address the situation unless it's an absolute emergency. Okay. So again, and 99.999% of the time that I've received calls after hours, it has not been an emergency, and it's been something that could certainly have been addressed the next day, right? So those kinds of things, you got to set boundaries and be okay with explaining it to your team. Also, I'll say some stuff like this: give yourself breaks during the day, like set a 30-minute break, for goodness sakes, at lunch, or you will never get lunch, ever, never. And that's wrong. It's bad. You can't work for 8 hours straight and expect good output the whole time. Nobody can. You're going to get sick. So give yourself a break at lunch. 30 minutes, an hour would be even better. Also, give yourself a break at the end of the day where you can recover from the email deluge that you've been ignoring while you've been in all your meetings. Give yourself 30 minutes to an hour at the end of the day where you're not, and trust me, people will overlap, that break, but at least it's there. So that in certain situations, you'll at least get some time, to recover from not being able to answer all the emails that came in all day. Because it can't be that you are on calls until 6 o'clock and then you have 2 more hours of emails to respond to. It's now 8 o'clock and you started at 7 in the morning. You're now at 13 hours in a day. That will kill you. And it's not fair. So don't do that. Anyway. All right. So we talked about that a bunch. I really feel strongly about this because I think we are now program managers by having this expectation of this hustle mindset for PMs. Like they can run, 24 hours a day around the clock, and there's this expectation that anybody calls you, you're going to pick up that phone night and day, wherever, on vacation. If I could ask PMs, that are watching this, how many of you have been working during a vacation? All of you have. I'd be surprised if there was a PM out there that has not been called on vacation and had to do something about it. Again, I don't think that's a great idea. I think we need to be able to have people that we delegate these responsibilities to, on our teams. We need to have a deputy. We need to have somebody that you can say, I'm going to take a couple of days off and you need to take care of this. And that's the delegation that we have to do. And we have to be okay with that. But most of the time, we're type A. We want to control everything. We have a really hard time giving that kind of stuff up. So it's going to be tough. That's something you need to do for your own mental health and own best interest. All right. The last one here is, developing a positive mindset and being able to have resilience and cope with situations. A lot of times the positive mindset that you see, for me, I tend to, people would say, I'm pretty positive. That when they interact with me, they will say I'm positive. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm kind of an introvert. So a lot of that is, energy that I'm expressing out to, to make the interaction better. I'm kind of empathetic. I want the interaction to be positive. So a lot of times I'll come across as energetic, and that's good. I mean, I'm perfectly fine with that. But also being able to talk about your successes to yourself and have what they call, positive self-discussion. Instead of constantly beating yourself up, you've got to be able to flip that mindset and say, yeah, this went really, really well. And I'm super happy about, how that situation went. And I worked really hard on it, and that's okay. You did. And so don't beat yourself up over it. That positive reinforcement is going to be something that's going to really help you in managing your stress and your output, the way people perceive you. You want it to be positive. And set achievable goals and hit them on a regular basis. Like I said before, so many times we as PMs are going to go in here and going to be like, yeah, I want to be VP, and I'm running a 4-person contract. That's going to be a while, right? Set intermediate goals that are achievable, and that will help you get this positive mindset that you can do it. You can continue on. You can, you continue to improve. And that's a huge deal. So also it will help you bounce back from disappointments and from adversity. And that's just going to happen, right? So in order to be able to bounce back from diversity, from situations where you have adversity, then you need to be able to, again, set realistic goals and focus on your own strengths and your accomplishments. When things get crazy and are coming at you a million miles an hour, you've got to be able to focus on, I can do this. I've done it in the past. I have had these successes. I can handle this. And you're good to go. It's not a problem, right? So that is the ability to be resilient, to deal with these stresses as they come in, and remember that you are successful. You are working with integrity. You've done everything that you can appropriately, and that will help you to bounce back from these shots that you're going to get all the time. You're constantly going to be hit with things. You have to be resilient. It's really critical. And so a lot of that also comes with knowing and understanding coping mechanisms to deal with this stuff as it's coming at you. You have to be able to do things like take a deep breath, relax. You have to understand relaxation techniques. You have to understand meditation, whether you like it or not. Getting into just breathing can do immense good for you to calm down and be able to address a situation with a calm and reasonable mind. So again, no coping mechanisms. Have them. They need to be positive. They can't be bad things, right? Things that are going to end up burning you down. You have to have positive things that are going to help you cope and deal with these things. And have your own checkbox. You need to know what works for you. And the last thing that I'll talk about is we talked about imposter syndrome, and you'll see over and over again the same kind of messages coming through. So with imposter syndrome, set achievable goals, and recognize the events that you've made, right? You have to be aware that you have abilities and ability to be a great manager, and you are rightfully in the position because you were selected as the best person for the job, and it's not a fluke. It's not an accident. You have to be able to focus on your strengths and your accomplishments and be okay with the fact that you are in that leadership position, and, and justifiably so. It's okay. Also, it's really important to surround yourself, like I said earlier, and I'll close with this. Having supportive people around you, people that care for you, have your best interest at heart. Also, people in your, what I would say, kind of almost inner circle, your direct reports, that are going to help to strengthen your organization and help to be a push, a pull on those things. They're invaluable when you have somebody in your organization that does that. I'll mention, recently I had somebody that's in kind of my, inner circle, email me about, hey, I saw that you were overbooked on this meeting. I can take that if you want. And it's like, wow, that would be amazing. Yes, because I've got to go to this other meeting, but if you can take that one, then that's less stress on me and I don't have to worry about it. Instead of stacking another meeting on top of it, they actually took one away. And that kind of situation, having people like that, you will appreciate so much more, when they do something like that and you have those people around you, because they do exist, and you need to foster that kind of culture of support and helping out, because again, you need that, and your staff needs that. You need to know that you're going to be there for them. There for you. It's all right. So I will close with this. There are a lot of challenges being a program manager, no question. There are also a lot of positives, and I will talk about the positives before. A lot of the issues that you run into as a program manager are addressable, if you're aware of them and you can manage them. You're a manager, you should be able to manage this too. And there are plenty of ways in which you can do that. Please take, some of these to heart. And also, like I said, go and seek advice from, counselors and things like that, because they could have a completely different, option for you that may work perfectly. because like I mentioned before, we're all different and different things work for us. So you got to be okay and keep trying. Don't ever stop trying to find the things that are going to help you cope, because there are things out there for everybody. So you need to do that. Yeah, it's not the end of the world, right? To have mental health challenges. Everybody has got them. It's all over the place. And so just be aware of that and be okay with that and seek support and help when you can, right? So I'll leave it at that. The program management career can be incredibly challenging, but it can also be incredibly rewarding. There's going to be ups and downs throughout the entire process. The main thing that you need as a program manager is to be prepared for that and have responses that are kind of in the wings, ready to go when you run into these situations. I think you'll be happier, you'll be more resilient, and you'll be able to deal with a broader range of challenges than you ever thought you possibly could. All right, so if you're having any of these situations and issues, know that you're not alone. There are plenty of us that have dealt with it and are dealing with it. Reach out to a program manager. Hopefully they'll be able to speak with you. Also, reach out, a mental health professional. They're invaluable. I can't recommend counseling enough. All right. So I know this was a little heavy, but I hope it helped. And every Thursday, we have these chats, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Fed PM Pro channel. So please stop by. I'm always looking for ideas and suggestions and questions. So if you have any, please post them in the comments or the chat, and I will look at them as possibilities for future episodes. And that's what this channel is for, is to try to help anybody that is looking at becoming a project or program manager in the future and has questions about what that career will be like and what they can do to prepare themselves. Again, if this helped and you enjoyed the content, please consider liking. Also subscribe. As I mentioned, we'll have these every Thursday and continue to provide information on becoming the best possible program manager you can be. So with that, continue eating and continue being the best person that you can be. Thanks.